Okay, what is going on with Bryan Insurance?
Well, from all the research I've been doing last night, it's pretty crazy out there in the world. So one of the things that I've been looking into is something I've been always curious about and just kind of decided to do a whole research on it, is the war exclusion on the cyber liability policy. It's something that's always been curious on my own mind, and I wanted to talk about it today. So on every policy out there, there's an exclusion for war, which makes sense. You don't want to pay for that. It's a government entity. But one of the major issues is on cyber policies with Taiwan and Ukraine. You have the Russians and you have the Chinese, who both have very, very good cyber programs that are always going after other countries. And this is the thought I had, was what if China tax your business?
They can.
They can do that. They absolutely
and they
can.
have been.
They have been. And how does a cyber policy protect your business in this incident? And that was my curiosity. And it turns out we don't know.
Yeah.
And that's,
I don't think anybody knows.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. Even on the policy, the wording and everything, we don't know. It hasn't gone through the courts. There's been several cases where they have shown war and tried to figure it out. One of the major problems is what do you consider cyber? Is that a traditional form of war? And that's the problem. In the courts at this moment, we don't know. But a lot of the companies out there have the exclusions in there, and a lot of them, if you have a cyber policy or any type of property policy or anything, this is something that y'all might really want to start looking into. Companies are changing the definition. Cyber especially, they are broadening the exclusion. A lot of the things, the wording in there talks about, what's it called? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. It talks about the acts of war, the acts of the government, but now they're broadening it to even just general government use.
Well, I read an article about Russia. They're in such financial bind right now that they are upping their cyber attacks on companies to get the ransomware.
They're not. They themselves are not doing it. They're using a third-party group
to do
called
Conchi.
It's their criminal organization that they hire to do a lot of their cyber attacks. And that's another issue is a third party of a government entity or an agency of a government entity, is that covered under the cyber liability policy? Two companies I do know of have put that in their exclusion, where a third-party attack is considered a government attack, which is considered an act of hostilities by a foreign government. Those are ramping up. They are definitely putting those in policies. And so one of my biggest things is like, you need to look at if you have a cyber policy, you need to look into that. Make sure that exclusion is not in there. The redefinition of the war policy.
So in other forms, not cyber necessarily, there's the war exclusions are pretty similar in wording, like war including undeclared or civil war is war, which is excluded from your property policy. And then it talks about military force, insurrection, rebellion, revolution. So if that happens and you have a property policy, that's going to be excluded most of the time. And then there's terrorism, which has its own definition.
Oh yeah, and that one's
after the 9/11, they came up with this terrorism. It's called TRIA, which is the Terrorism Insurance Act. And the government did, and you have the option of purchasing that on your policies. But for that to kick in, there has to be at least $100 million of damage to be considered a terrorist attack.
Wow.
And I've always kind of thought, if we've had $100 million of damage in Graham, Texas, insurance is not going to be our problem. But terrorism is it's a coverage that you can purchase. And one of the things that I read, and this is just very general terms, that cyber acts aren't violent and don't cause physical damage. So in many cases, cyber attacks are not considered terrorism or war. So, it's just...
Yep, and that's where they're changing that definition. Their cyber's broadening up, man. They're finding ways to cover, put that out there. Very interesting stuff.
Well, looking at some of the businesses that are being attacked, what I was reading about in the deal is that there's no rhyme or reason to it. And a lot of times these third-party attackers are assuming that a business has the money to pay for it. And a lot of times you may not. But they think, hey, it's a mom and pop computer place, in Albuquerque, and they think, oh man, this got to be like Apple or something. We're going to go after those guys. You got to really be careful about that.
And also, like a lot of like the Chinese state-sponsored cyber attacks, those are very, very, very old, poor, retired people. They scooped up off the streets, gave them a laptop, gave them a little bit of training, said, "Go have fun. This is your new job." Those I'm not so worried about on those. And it's mostly the soccer moms that download the programs off the black web and get a list and go for the phishing. Those are the primary ones that I see as the true threat. Those will get you every time. Those are the ones that go after the title companies, the financial institutes, the banking. There's like the top 5, but title companies are the ones that always get attacked.
Well, to go along with that, I was reading in that same article that a lot of times these are inside jobs because places you work, you got a disgruntled employee or someone who feels like, okay, well, I'm not being as valued as I think I should, and they'll turn over, they look at a big corporation thinking, that's no big deal, and then bam.
It can happen for sure. And I'll just say, and I say it all the time, get a quote for cyber liability. Please, I beg, if you own a business, get a quote for cyber liability. I know you don't think you need it, but if it happens to you, there is a very good chance you're going to be out of business.
Right.
And not just talking about war or terrorism.
Yeah, but that's just one of those things that
just get a quote on it and get comparisons, which we can do that for you. Because once it happens, it's bad news.
Exactly.
And
okay.
the insurance is really not that expensive for the terrorists. For the
cyber's
coverage.
Cheap.
Yeah.
It's
So
crazy.
please, I beg of you.
Well, how do folks get a hold of you?
Okay, you can call us at 940-549-2525, second floor Ciera Bank and Graham. In Hudson Oaks, 817-770-0096, 2950 Fort Worth Highway, Suite 500, or online.
Oh, yeah. You can come see us at brianins.com.
Go ahead, you say it.
Brian with a Y.
All right. Get it done.
All right, thank y'all.